Hello and welcome to the show. Today we're going to wrap up the discussion from where we stopped off yesterday. So, this is your first time of listening to the podcast. After you're done listening to this, it'll help if you go back and listen to one more episode because you're catching this discussion midstream. So, today we're going to tackle the second question that we left off from yesterday, and that is we're trying to figure out if this is a problem worth solving. Now, in the previous episode, we came up with a fictional scenario where we have someone who is trying to start up a nanny service in a cosmopolitan city like Abuja or Lagos or PH, Washington, wherever. And the answer to the question which we considered yesterday was that if you're going to send out a proposal, a presentation, a price quote, a flyer, whatever it is that you use in your business at this stage, then you want to make sure that you're sending it to the right person and that the person has the right problem. And when we say the right problem, we mean that it's something that you have the skill set to solve or that you have the inventory to solve. And then you also want to check to be sure that you're sending it to the person who has the authority to make a decision within a reasonably determined time frame. Because there's no point sending out proposals and flyers to someone who has the right who is the right person, who has the right problem, who can make the decision, but then the person might decide next month, might decide in 2 months, might decide next year, might decide tomorrow. There's no clear criteria for when the person is going to be able to make a decision. So you have to do all these things before you issue a presentation, a proposal, a price quote, a flyer, or whatever it is. And the whole point of making sure that you engage people in conversation to sort these things out is just so that you don't end up in those scenarios where you're sending out tons and tons of proposals, you're not hearing back from anyone, and then you know that nagging feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach. Am I just wasting my time with this business? I'm sending out proposals, I'm not hearing back from anyone. When you go through this whole process, you ask these questions, engage in the conversation. At least you get a sense of who you should expect to hear back from soon or not, who you should spend some more time pursuing or not. It makes things a whole lot easier. You know what to expect, and of course, it also sets the expectations up on the other end that you're a competent professional and that you're handling this thing nice and smooth, and that the people and that you expect a certain measure of professional courtesy in return. Let me just put it that way. Now, there's one step that we didn't do yesterday, and that was the discovery process. Because all the things that I've spoken about so far, right person, right problem, authority, time frame, budgets, all those sorts of things, that's typically what we would call the what's it called? The qualification process. Yes, the qualification process in traditional sales theory. But qualification is just part of the equation because there's also discovery. Now, discovery is the stage of the relationship or the conversation where you're asking questions to dig into the problem. You want to find out how big the problem is. You want to find out if the people have any alternatives to the solution that you're selling, the way that they're trying to solve the problem now. Because we're just trying to figure out if this is a problem worth solving. Because if we have all these things, right person, right problem, they're ready to make a decision, they could decide maybe next week. Remember, we're talking about 90 services. But if it's not a problem worth solving, these are things that also affect whether the people decide to go on or not. Now, for those of you who listened to yesterday's episode, remember that we came down with two scenarios. So you run your 90 service, Abuja, Lagos, and you're talking to several people. You take them through the qualifications process. So excuse me, and so excuse me. The cold is getting better, but still there. What was I? Okay, so we have two possible prospects now. One is a mother of one who lives 30 minutes outside the city center and she needs a nanny for 2 days a week. And another person is a mother of seven who does live in the city center but she needs nanny services for 7 days of the week and up until 8 p.m. on weekdays, which is when she gets back. And then there's some driving involved because they're going to be picking up the children from school. Now, these were helpful examples to show how qualification is an essential process to go through. Because if you go through making sure you're with the right person, the right problem, authority, and then all of that, quite clearly, now we've seen that the mother of one who lives outside the city and only needs a nanny for 2 days is going to receive a different price quote, presentation, proposal, or whatever it is that you call it, than the mother of seven who lives in the city center and who needs services for 7 days a week. The mother of seven, well, I don't know what the professional recommendations are because I don't know it. I don't run the nanny service, but I'm beginning to wonder if it'll make sense for you to send only one nanny to someone who's a mother of seven and who actually needs a service for 7 days a week up until 8 p.m. So clearly, the number of hands that you send on the job might differ. The number of hours required, transportation costs might be less when it comes to option two, where it's the mother of seven. But then again, I suspect that for those of you who have these kinds of services, I suspect that mother of seven, the presentation, the price quotes, the price list, whatever it is that you send, is going to be considerably higher. So now it's not just enough to arrive at these circumstances that these are professional women, this is where they live, these are the number of children, and then these are the number of days and hours that they require. We still have to ask some other questions because we're trying to dig into other circumstances. Now, of course, remember that the questions you're asking, you're not interrogating people. You have to keep this nice and conversational. You're also trying to figure out, are they self-employed or not? Is the spouse self-employed? Do they have family members in town? How have they been coping so far? Do they have flexible work schedules? These are the things that determine whether this is a problem worth solving or not. So if the woman works full time, but then her husband is self-employed or has a flexible work schedule, maybe this is how they've been coping for the last 3 or 4 years, even though they have 7 children. So if you're asking questions about how they've been coping in the past and they've been coping with the 7 kids and they've managed to do the 7 kids thing for the last 3 or 4 years, if you deliver a hefty quote, it's possible that they might think, okay, if it's going to cost us this much a week, okay, I don't know how much it's going to cost, so let me just throw out a random number. For those of you who run nanny services, please forgive me. I don't know anything about your business, so I'm just throwing out random numbers. So if the cost is going to come up to maybe like 20K a week, they might do the math. Okay, 20K a week, that's going to be 20 times 4, that's 80. 80K a month, they might just say 80K a month. Okay, let's round that up to 100 grand. And they're thinking, wow, 100 grand. We've been coping fine so far for the last 3 years. Maybe we don't need to spend 100 grand right now. So you can see how in this case, if we ask questions about the other circumstances, we can start getting a sense of whether these people might think this is a problem that is worth solving now. Because finding someone to help us with the 7 kids is a big problem. But if we've coped for the last 3 years and trying to solve it is going to cost us 100 grand a month, maybe now is not the time. But of course, it depends on other circumstances like how much money they have and blah blah blah. But these are the reasons why you have to ask all these questions. The other hand, let's see, the mother of one. Okay, well, there's no need to keep coming up with scenarios on and on and on because I'm sure you guys get the picture. So it's not just enough to be sure that it's the right person, the right problem, and we know what their time frames are around making a decision, but want to know if they think this is a problem that is worth solving. Because in this particular circumstances, if there is some flexibility, if they have some family members in town, and if they've been coping for the last 3 years, and they have flexibility in their work schedule, they might not go ahead with it. But if there's no flexibility in their work schedule, let's say both of them work for, one person works for Zenith Bank, and maybe the other person works with CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria, then let's see, okay, maybe the 7 kids, how they've been coping is because they had nanny services already for the last 3 years, but then the nanny left because she went home to go and get married. And let's say they don't have family members in town, maybe they're like me, family members are in Makudi or living abroad, so they're the only ones in the city. Let's see what else. So, I mean, given those circumstances, it looks more likely that these are people that have to make a decision now, because after all, for the last 3 or 4 years, they did have a nanny, and this is why it didn't work out. So all those things are also important. But of course, you get all this information by engaging people, conversations. You just make it conversational. Like in this case, the mother of seven, it will be something let me see. Okay, how best to go about it? Okay, something like okay, so I've mentioned the sorts of questions that you would have asked in the beginning. Okay, since we did that in the previous episode, no need to rehash. So at this case, we've already established quite a bit of rapport. So it will just be a matter of keeping it nice and conversational. Like, madam, you've really tried, though. 7 kids. I mean, how have you been coping? And then you guys are going to get into that conversation about how she found the last nanny, and then where, and then how long, and then the challenges that they had, and all whatnot, and and yeah, and then just keep it conversational. Like, oh, your husband must be really supportive, and then the woman is like, supportive how? He works at this place from this to this, and then blah 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 blah. To the to the potential customer, it just seems like casual conversation. Of course, you are the professional, you know the information that you need, and so it just seems like casual conversation, but you're getting all the nuggets that you need to figure out if they think that this is a problem worth solving. Now, this process is called discovery. So qualification, really important. Right person, right problem. But then discovery is also important because you have to dig into the problem. How big is the problem? Do they have any alternatives? Do they think this is a problem worth solving? And this is the reason why. If it is not a problem worth solving, then maybe you should consider, is it worth working up a presentation, working up a proposal? Because recently I had to refer someone, a friend, to someone who needed what was it called? Some marketing services. Let me just put it that way. And they had a few phone conversations, and the person spent 3 or 4 days putting together 2 proposals. And at the end of the day, the gig did not close. Now think of the hours that were involved in coming up with all the marketing ideas, the marketing collateral, stuff like that. So you invest 4 days and then the deal doesn't close. But if if you had a solid sales process and you ran some discovery questions, you could have figured out, is this a big enough problem? Is this something worth solving now? And if it doesn't look like the possible client thinks that it's a problem worth solving, maybe you don't have to invest 4 hours of your time over the next 1 week to put together a proposal only for the person to say, no, I'm not interested. So go through this process and ask yourself, is this worth coming up with the time, putting aside the time to work up a proposal or a presentation? And even if you do decide that it's probably not worth the time, let me just put it in anyway. It's not like I have anything better to do. At least now you have the right expectations. You know you're in for a longer follow up cycle. You know that there's a possibility of the deal not working through. So you're not going to be unpleasantly surprised if things don't work out. In fact, if anything, I guess if you run the discovery process right and you think that the chances are low, the room for being pleasantly surprised is a lot higher. So that's the reason why we ought to engage people in these sorts of conversations. And that's the reason why it's not just important that you are a master of your craft. So, yes, you might be very good. You went to nanny school in the UK. You know everything about child development. And yes, you're properly capitalized. You raise money from your parents. You raise money from friends and family. You have a marketing team. All the marketing things, your Instagram, everything looks real tight. Your website is real nice. The corporate logo is real good. Those are not the only things that you need to succeed in the business. Having a sales framework, knowing how to handle conversations, knowing how to approach people, knowing how to guide the conversation through, knowing how to sift out people who are interested, those who are merely curious, people who are just waka pass, as we like to say in Nigeria. Waka pass. That's for those of you who are not Nigerians. That's people who are walking through. Yes, They're not really, might not make a commitment today or any other day. They just happen to be walking on by. We need to be able to sort through all those people. Anyway, we're heading to the 15-minute mark, so I'll just wrap it up here. And that's pretty much how we deal. That's for today's episode and yesterday's episode. This is pretty much the thought process that we have to go through when someone hits us up to say, "Hey, what's up? Are you available? How much? Send me a proposal." Before you send a proposal, these are the sorts of things that you have to engage in: discovery, qualification. If this is your first time of listening to the podcast, skip back to yesterday's episode, listen to the whole thing. As one stretch, it will make a whole lot more sense then. And then after listening to the podcast, if you're curious, you still want to learn some more, we have, I think, currently 611 episodes of the podcast. All you have to do is use the search function, hit qualification, hit discovery. You see other episodes where I've gone through other scenarios, probably in some more details, especially since the older podcast episodes were longer. So there's probably some more detail in the older episodes. So remember that you guys can subscribe for free, because the majority of you are still listening to the podcast using your web browsers. I find that really hard to believe. Over 30% of you are using your web browser, and it just makes me wonder which of you are listening to podcasts on a desktop or on a laptop. I just assumed everybody was on the mobile phone now. So subscribe for free, even though you're on the web browser. You can subscribe to the podcast. It's Sales for the Nigerian Business Person podcast. We're on Spotify, we're on Google, Apple iTunes, Pocket Cast, Anchor, Overcast, or any other podcast player of your choice. Now remember, I'm your host. My name is Tabishima. Yes, that rhymes with Hiroshima. I'll see you guys at the next episode.